I don't want to do any intro stuff.
Sweet.
I figure I'll let them just run like we'll just like say hey and then let them run whatever intro roll or something.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the intro.
Yeah. Cold start.
Cold start. Yeah. Excited to be a guest host. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we'll see how you do.
Am I the full time? Have I been full time promoted?
We'll see how you do.
Depends.
It depends.
No, super excited to dig into a couple topics. For those who don't know me, I'm KP's partner at Shadow Ventures. Anything you'd use to describe me?
Yeah, and I'm KP. Hopefully you already know me if you're tuning in, but if you don't, I'm KP Reddy. Yeah, so we're mixing up things a little bit. Nick and I think have some pretty cool conversations a few times a day. I think the cool thing about venture is it's just everything changes every day. So we figured instead of we would take our talks outside of our text threads and daily conversations and just like throw them out there for you guys to chew on.
Might as well just start recording all of our meetings.
Yeah, exactly. We could just
do a more efficient way to do this.
Except for audio quality. Kids screaming in the background, dogs barking.
I already had to text our nanny to not bother us during this conversation.
I'm sure that's very relatable. Does everybody else is having to text their nanny to listen to that?
Yeah. I feel like we can talk about a lot of stuff. I actually am going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
There was there's two LinkedIn posts that I want to talk through with you today that I think we're both pretty well versed on, like both in terms of the portfolio and just in terms of what's happening and trending in venture.
Mm-hmm.
But the curveball I want to throw you is something that you said in a meeting that I participated in. Maybe I was a fly on the wall. And I think it's I think it's just an interesting topic. So let me find the actual quote that you said. So, okay, here it is. The number one thing that you need to know is that you fucking know nothing.
Yep.
That was a direct quote in a meeting this week. Do you recall the meeting?
Yeah, I do.
And you said, to follow it up, you said, we don't decide anything.
Right.
The customer decides everything. The market decides everything. So I thought, let's talk through that. Like you don't have to give the full context, obviously some private.
Sure, we'll talk about the context. We just won't name names. We won't name names.
Yeah, let's just not name names. Like what did you mean by that? Why is that? Like the way, so I'll give some context. The way you said it was that it was a non-negotiable for a team, and it's a company you're running.
Yep.
And it was a non-negotiable for the team that they had to essentially buy into this principle. And you said it very emphatically, like clearly you mean it. It's something that, like if someone disagreed with this, they need to leave the room. They might need to leave the company.
Right.
Where did this philosophy come from? What does it mean? All the above.
Yeah, I think it's well, my lashing out the other day and cursing was, I get tired of being asked, what should we do? Right? That somehow I have the answers. And I do have some answers, but I don't also think that I have all the answers. So we start talking about kind of deep dive on product, on a feature, when you start digging into the weeds of like, hey, we want to make a decision on, and it could be as simple as, in the most simplistic world is, do I want to put this button to the right, to the left? Is it green? Is it blue? All those things, right? I think my frustration the other day was this idea that I have the answers. And then the second piece of that is that the team thought they had the answers.
Wait, that you, KP, have the answers?
Right.
Okay.
Hey, tell us what to do. Tell us what do you think we should do? Like, it's kind of weird. I'm not the customer.
Yeah.
right? And so I think part of the frustration is, when you look at businesses, and you build a culture, there's a lot of cultures that people come from, especially the AEC industry. Is it about satisfying the customer or is it about satisfying your boss? So if you grow up in an engineering company, it's about satisfying your boss because they're the professional engineer, they're the registered architect, they're the principal of the firm. And so your internal customer your customer is actually the internal customer, which is probably your boss. So when you look at a lot of people that come from very parochial cultures where it doesn't matter what the customer says, it matters what your boss says, it's like a hard break. When I was in engineering, I would literally have bosses tell me, I don't care what the client says. Here's what I'm telling you to do. And so I think a lot of times in this industry, when you pull people out of industry, like in this case, there's definitely like, hey, what do you think we should do? What should we do? And I think my point was, I'm not the customer. We're not doing quarterly reviews with pay band. Like, this is not what this is. This is a startup, and foundationally, I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me. We have to have consensus about what the customer and the market thinks, and that's all that matters.
What's your what's your response to someone who says, the Henry Ford quote that, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me what's the
Yeah,
quote?
yeah, it's a dumb quote.
They would have told me like
If I would have
faster
asked
horses,
customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
faster horses.
Right.
So what like I think there is a
But Nick, the second part to that is, what did he give them? He gave them faster horses. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not saying you take everything a customer says at face
yeah,
value,
yeah,
but you have to understand what is it, because they may not be able to frame. You have little ones, I have a little one. They can't communicate what their needs are. They just cry. Sometimes we have to decipher what the actual need is, right? So I think even in the Henry Ford quote, um, yeah, people couldn't, they couldn't envision the technology, right? So I heard a great quote the other day. They said, they promised us flying cars. What did we get? And someone said, helicopters. Like, we got helicopters. Like, sure, it's a flying car.
yeah.
So I think the fallacy with that quote a little bit is, I think that's what Henry Ford did give people, is faster horses, just not horses.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, usually when I hear objections to that theory,
Mhm.
it's usually around the idea that the customers have no idea what they want, right?
Yeah.
And so essentially what you're saying is like it starts with first listening to them and asking them,
Yeah.
and without first having that conversation and understanding the playing field, you can't even start to either deliver exactly on the problem they're trying to solve, or innovate and deliver something that, a Steve Jobs would deliver or that a Henry Ford would deliver that is vastly different than what came before it, and maybe
Mhm.
would not be exactly what they requested, but still is solving their problem uniquely, in a way that we could not before previously as a civilization.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the phone part didn't work on the iPhone. Like, your calls would drop constantly,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, it was kind of funny. You had to carry if you were the first iPhone use customer like I was, you actually kept a second phone. It's It didn't work half the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I also think, even that's why customer discovery is just such a life cycle process. It's just
Yeah.
constant. It's just a constant process, because sometimes you can't deliver what the customer needs are with what's available as in terms of technology and innovation, or at the price point. I don't think, I always love talking about Steve Jobs, because like people like to use him as the epitome of everything that is right in the world and everything that is wrong in the world. And I don't think there was a meeting where like, I think people will spend $1,500 on a phone. Like, that is not what, the vision was necessarily. I think over time and iteration, you start to understand what the customer's thinking is and how far you can stretch their imagination into what's next.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, like, our kids are gonna be the most documented kids ever.
Yeah.
My older kids, I have boxes and boxes of pictures and
Yeah.
video cassettes that'll
I
never I
think
don't
I
know
think I think about this a lot actually.
what
It's so different. Like the fact that we'll be able to instantly show them a video when they're 18 of a video when they were 1, like I mean, it's a weird concept, you know?
right?
I mean, it's really neat. I mean, I look at all the time and we look at, baby videos and photos of my 4-year-old, right? Like, but yeah, I that concept will be, the documentation as a result of, improvements and essentially in chips, right?
I remember
Didn't exist in the first iPhone. Yeah.
right, my first phone that had a camera, I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Why I was like, "Oh, this will be good for me to take pictures of my receipts for expense reports." That was my that was my use case. I would have never thought, like, how we take pictures now. Like, I would have
Yeah.
never thought
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
never understood it.
And by the way, I'm sure you're aware of this trend that people are running away from, like, creatively.
Mhm.
Everyone's tired of like the perfected
Yeah,
iPhone photos. Like
yeah,
people are buying, old Polaroids and older style cameras to get the vintage feel, basically to do anything that's differentiated from what
mhm,
technology has now commoditized, right?
right,
And
right.
yeah, and so
'Cause we can
yeah,
all take a perfect picture now,
yeah,
and that's just boring.
yeah,
That's just boring, right? So, we've got I think we're on our 3rd what's that called? The Instamax or something? Instack.
yeah,
We're, like, on our 3rd one because they also are
yeah,
really good at breaking.
yeah.
So
All right. So to close this thought out, so let's go back to the quote. Um, the lesson is to listen to your customers and don't ask your boss. Don't expect anyone at a startup to tell you the answers. What other takeaways are really important for this context?
yeah, yeah. I think that's the point though, right? Like, use your experience, intelligence, creativity to infer things, right? But you can't just say like, "I've been doing this for 20 years." I mean, I could say that, "I've been doing this for 30 years. I know everything." I can say
Yeah,
those words. I might be successful, but I probably won't.
yeah,
So, I think that's one of those things. I've had a few calls today with some AEC executives that have these strong, they built some internal tech. You've seen this before. We think we can spin it out and get it venture fundable. And then you try to explain to them, like, you're the only customer for this product. Like, how have you
yeah.
talked to the market? They're like, no, we know transportation engineering.
Mhm,
Why would we go talk to someone else?
mhm. Or they've talked to their,
Team.
their buddies, their team, their colleagues at, their peers at other firms,
Yeah,
and they've pitched them the idea, and the ideas sound it always sounds good in theory, and their buddies aren't gonna shoot them down. So it's never true market feedback,
right.
and I mean, that is the unwillingness to pursue true market feedback, I think is like I think it's maybe one of the bigger problems. It's one of the bigger reasons startups and, at the stage we're investing in, it's one of the bigger reasons they fail. They don't actually wanna go to market.
No, and I think that the other thing too is, if you ask your employees and you're the boss, like, "Hey, isn't this a great idea?" Of course, it's a great idea. You're the boss. These are very parochial markets.
Yeah,
And then I think when you find these founders um, that have a ton of industry experience and are wanting to do a startup, it's all like what I call the pedestrian ideas. It's all these problems that they saw at work that they now think is a product. But the problem is everybody else has seen those same problems. It's not really, and they have chosen not to solve them necessarily. And I think that it's a huge problem. I think when you have a lot of engineering brains in this industry, it's like I already know.
Mm-hmm.
I already know. And it's like, maybe.
Like, yeah, yeah. The there's a segue into I don't actually think this is one of our topics today, but there's a segue into the trend that you've talked about in previous shows. I'm a listener, first time,
Or
long time
first time
listener,
caller.
first time caller. Um, the M&A trend, the brackish waters concepts, where PE is converging with VC, but basically, like the concept I have in mind is you go out, you build, agentic workflows to
Mhm,
plug in to existing stale traditional workflow heavy businesses. Think of an accounting firm, think of law practices, think of even to some extent AE firms like are a
mhm,
big part of the conversation, right? Like
yep,
computationally heavy, workflow heavy industries that AI changes the cost structure of, right? The the concept of going out to acquire distribution, right?
mhm,
You're going to make an acquisition before you actually organically sell into the market, right? There's an interesting thing here where you don't actually like you're by acquiring distribution by making your first acquisition, you're actually not having to sell the product, right? You don't
right,
actually know if the product, if the end customers that you've built this agentic tool for,
mhm,
if they actually care about it, if it's meaningful. It's kind of you're building internal tools and like you're validating it yourself, right?
mhm,
You're saying this is
yep,
good enough to change the cost structure of this traditional business.
yeah,
But I think that's an interesting thing that is not talked about is that you're acquiring distribution.
mhm,
You're going out to buy these practices, and like in some ways, you're circumventing the risk that the product does not get adopted.
right.
What do you think about that idea?
I think, I think the idea though is if you look at these models, right, you're buying companies and industries that already exist, right? So it's not really that you're on the front end offering anything different. It's really more on the back end, you're operationalizing it. So as far as the customer goes, so the question would be like in that model, who is the customer? Right?
Yeah,
Because in many ways, the end customer, their experience, maybe gets a little bit better, but the end customer maybe isn't the end customer. So if you're basically going in and buying a law firm and deploying agentic AI, isn't the customer really the lawyers? Right. So I think what you need to think about is, that's the constant thing that can just like keep you awake at night is iterating who the customer is. Right. And I think these roll ups and these strategies, like buy a bunch of accounting firms and roll them up and put agentic
yeah,
AI on the back end. I don't think the end customer is the customer. I think it's really the partners of that accounting firm or the law firm. They may indeed be the customers because the end customer doesn't know any better. They're still getting their draw plans and specs, right? They don't really know anything.
yeah,
So I do think maybe that's the shift in thinking you have to approach. If you remember, like at Summit 2 years ago, 3 years ago, our friend Tim Sheehan, the CEO of Greenlight, he made just one big point the entire time: distribution is all that matters.
yeah, yeah,
That's it's like He's like, we did a deal. I think it was like J.P. Morgan or somebody, and he was like, we didn't even know if we're going to make money on the economics.
yeah,
Distribution is all that matters,
yeah,
right? And there's something to be said to that because once you have distribution behind the scenes, then you can do
yeah.
all kinds of fun stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah. So in some sense, there's a safeguard. It's the go to market motion, the customer feedback that you're, in this, to take it back to the quote, that you're begging your team to figure out.
Hmm.
It's like somewhat of a way around that, but the actual measurement of listening to the customer is listening to how effective the tools are,
Hmm.
listening, noticing, observing how they're getting adopted, and the metric is more about adoption and uptake internally, and then ultimately the metric is like how do your costs change. That's the promise here. The outcome is like do your costs improve? Are you are you operating more efficiently as a firm with AI?
Yeah, think about it this way. In the past where I've done a lot of these corporate spin out deals, and I did one for an engineering firm, 2,500 person engineering firm. And the funniest thing we together built a product in house, and we had more adoption outside of the firm than inside of the firm, right? We couldn't sell the internal customer like at all. We were able to sell the external customer better. And there was some politics and culture, but I think in your point around whether it's the AI roll up strategy, the end customer is the lawyer, right? The partner lawyer. Your competitors may be a paralegal or a recent law firm, law school grad is probably your competitive aspect. So you have to outperform a paralegal or a recent grad because your customer is probably really the lawyer in the firm.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right, curveball over. we can take it to the traditional approach of the show, which is discussing your viral sometimes LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
I don't know if this one went viral. It seems to. I'm pulling it up now. It seems to have some good feedback.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna read it to you, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep.
There has been a macro trend to vertically integrate businesses. I was asked by a large engineering firm CEO, how did we go so far away from the master builder concept? My response, number one, buildings got more complex. Two, the world got flat. It was possible to be a specialist expert globally versus a generalist expert locally, i.e., a design structure, that was super tall, that where you could service and build this super tall building globally versus a full service engineering firm that can do everything locally. Number three, risk aversion and lack of single point on a project. Hence, the owner's rep emerged as essentially the point of contact for the owner. I think this over specialization and fragmentation created even more silos between design and construction. It was not typical for there to be 100 plus companies executing work. I think AI and robotics is going to drive vertical integration back to the master builder. The new master builder is the inference and orchestration model managed through MCP. There's a lot to unpack here. Let's start at the top. So like the 3 points, like the vertical integration concept, the master builder, we went away from it. Let's talk about the 3 points. So first, buildings got more complex.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about buildings these days, HVAC systems are more complex. Think about like maybe the elementary school that you saw was like cinder blocks, pretty simple systems, same floor, so we started dealing with much more complex systems. Now we have AV, AV is a standard. For a while there, I think they still do it, Cat 6, so low voltage, security systems, automated systems. There's just so many new systems that go into a building besides just concrete and steel. So buildings got more complicated. And then people kind of started making them more complicated. We started realizing like, oh, we don't want all our elementary schools to look the same. We're going to just design this one to look farmhouse style because it'll be better for the experience with the kids, right? So we went away from those ideas. So design got more complicated, the products and the needs got more complicated in terms of how we look at buildings. So you had that, right? But I think when I was a kid, my dad would like go to Saudi Arabia to work on a project for like a year. Right? He was gone for a year to work on one project and would fly in every once in a while. And not like we do now, right? But when I was a kid, like the idea that you flew somewhere for work was not like how we do it now. And so what it meant is if you were an architect and you were the local Atlanta architect, you did everything. You did schools, you did hospitals, you did everything that was needed as an architect to serve that community. You didn't get to decide like, I'm just going to do schools. I'm just going to do airports. Same thing happened with construction and engineering. So when you have to serve a hyperlocal market to make a living, you kind of have to do everything. Well, airplanes showed up, buildings got complex. Um, you hired specialty consultants for everything. You look at a job now, there's an indoor lighting consultant and an outdoor lighting consultant, right? You have landscaping, you have sprinkler. I mean, there's so many consultants on these projects now. But it used to be that actually the AC, if you talk to the old guys, right, they'll say, man, back then you had to know everything, which means you could coordinate everything because you had to know everything because there was like this master builder concept. And so I think, when the world became flat and people could fly around and use telephones and email, then email comes along, you can email drawings around. That's when people realized if I just wanted to be, I mean, you can make a living as an outdoor lighting consultant and build a nice company because you'll operate globally. You can be the outdoor lighting consultant for stadiums and just make a living doing that. And you just zip around and work on every stadium project and, build a nice business that way. So I think that's been kind of the overall dynamic is that everybody got very specialized and could find niches. Think about what's happened with venture, right? We're thematic. We have stages. We have, everybody has a flavor. If you go back to the beginning of venture, it was just like whatever, right?
We're gonna invest in semiconductors.
Right. Yeah. What stage? What stage? Like, who cares? Like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Now we
Everything is the same.
Yeah. I think we've just, like most industries, they become kind of over industrialized.
Yeah. The last piece, I think AI and robotics is going to drive vertical integration back to the master builder. The new master builder is the inference and orchestration model managed through MCP. First, clarify what MCP is, and when you say inference and orchestration model,
Yeah,
give people some context there.
So what happened in the labor model, right? Everybody got specialized, but nobody was in charge, right? So then owners were like, "Hey, I'm dealing with this architect. I'm dealing with an interior designer. There's 100 people. I don't know how to manage all this. Somebody needs to be in charge." Hence, the owner's rep showed up and said, and generally early stages of the owner's rep were like retired architects and engineers and contractors. Maybe they were the project executive for schools at a school system. They retire. The school says, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you help us manage
The
this
natural
stuff?"
consultant motion.
Right.
Part-time, you're an expert in the market. I'll help you out and advise you. Yeah.
You've been doing this forever. Would love to have you, come help me on my next project. So that's kind of the origins of a lot of these folks. But then I think what happened was when that business started getting bigger and bigger, the talent level went further and further down, right? Because you didn't have enough, there weren't enough retired people that wanted to go work to do this stuff. So the expertise kind of went down, right? So then once again, then we went through an industrialization cycle, right? So, we're going to build this industry. We're going to hire people straight out of art school and make them, nothing wrong with art school, just don't manage my building project, right? And come in, and I was talking to someone today and I said, it's one thing to say, hey, we hire people that don't know how to read drawings. It's one thing to say that, right? Okay, we can't find the right people, whatever. The problem is the point of view that you don't need to know how to read drawings to manage a project. That's the problem, right? It's one thing to say like, hey, you're not born reading drawings, right? But to say that like it's not important, it's like in VC, right? It's like you have to understand finance. You don't get to just understand VC. You actually have to understand finance and math, right? It's like I'm a VC, I don't know math. Like, is that really gonna work? you know. So I think, and by the way, there's probably VCs out there that don't know math, but they hang around
For
the
what
white
it's worth, VC math can be very simple. I mean, I'm a VC.
Yeah, but I think there's some people that just think they can hang around the hoop at YC and do deals, right?
100%. Yeah, there's like the
So
hustle culture VC that doesn't run the return math. They just get caught in the hype cycle and the momentum trading aspect of VC for sure. Yep.
exactly. So I think when we think about why owners rep showed up, it was because it got very fragmented. So now fast forward, right? So if I'm an architecture firm and instead of hiring uh, an outdoor lighting consultant, probably just ask Chat GPT, here's my drawings. Please design outdoor lighting for me.
Mhm.
One, there's no stamping of outdoor lighting plans, right? So there's no regulatory reason to send it out. It's just that we don't have enough people around. I don't want to keep someone full time on staff that does outdoor lighting and I barely use them.
Yep.
So now I can use so I think if we look at all the specialization, how much of that specialization can now be handled by AI? So therefore, I can take it back in house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so then you look at
Feels like a breakthrough. I mean, truly, like
yeah.
feels like it
Um,
has the potential to bring us all the way back, which is pretty wild actually when you think about the amount of entities that are involved and highly specialized today.
so think about, why do you hire an outside consultant? Competency or capacity or both?
Mhm.
That,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the, that's the
Lines
driver,
up.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So I have capacity, right? Technology has given us a lot of capacity. What AI has given us now is competency, right? And we haven't seen that before. We've had capacity. So now it's like, why don't I have someone in house? I can't keep them busy enough. Or when I'm really busy, they can't handle all the work. That's why, I mean, structural engineering used to be part of architecture. But
Mhm.
then they said, "Oh, we're hiring all these engineers and they're sitting around when we're
Yep.
slow, and then when we're busy, we have to turn down work because we don't have enough of them around," right? So that capacity and competency thing. So I think if you say the AI model now, AI allows us to both have capacity and competency. Some of these niche consulting things get taken out.
Yeah. Love it. It's why we're here. It's why we wake up every day.
Yeah. So so how's robotics any different?
Yeah.
Right. So GCs used to self-perform. Now they don't, right? They don't really self-perform that much. There's a few of our friends that do. Maybe they do concrete or something like that, but they generally don't self-perform anything. They manage other people. And so, hey, I couldn't keep all my drywallers busy. So I just spin it out and I'll use whatever drywall is available. Once again, I can have the capacity and competency and do lots of work. But what if I can buy, or painting, right? What if I can go buy a fleet of Okibos painting bots? That's no different than having work trucks, right?
Mhm.
In fact, I've seen some of these work trucks. I think you might be able to buy an Okibo robot cheaper than a work truck.
Yeah.
I've seen some of these dually F-350 things. They ain't cheap,
Yeah.
right? So instead of
I
having
actually think that checks out. I'm running the math in my head. That's about right.
so so you think about that, like, why would I buy a work truck? I can just buy an Okibo robot.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the painting business. Now I have capacity and competency.
Yeah.
So So that's where I think that happens. Now, when we talk about like the inference and orchestration, right? What does a GC do? They coordinate. What does an owner's rep or sometimes an architect does? They orchestrate, right? It's coordination, we call it that, right? So in our world, it's more like orchestration versus coordination. So the robots have to have someone to talk to that says, "Hey, don't go start painting because the drywall robots aren't done."
Mhm.
Right? So that's your orchestration,
Mhm.
probably some big antenna in the middle of the job site with AI and cameras on it saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, back off, Okibo. These guys have to come in," right? Just like what the
Mhm.
superintendent does running around. Same thing uh, on drawings and design, similar thing, right? There has to be an orchestration engine. Maybe it's the owner's rep, maybe it's somebody else. But when you think about that, so all of this now starts to map out to, and I talked about MCP, so it's model context protocol, right? So if you know APIs and hey, JSON software integrates and Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But the idea that two pieces of software integrate, right? So now with MCP, we're no longer talking about just data integration. We're talking about agents. So when we think about like an MCP
Like
server,
massive quantities of agents.
agents, right? So let's say tomorrow you start vibe coding, right? And you're like, man, I built this cool little tool that grabs all the light fixtures off of a PDF drawing. I figured out all the symbology for light fixtures, and I built this little agent, and it can go out and grab all those things and come up with redesign the spot, make sure that the lighting's designed properly, and build a lighting plan. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think you can charge for that? Probably nothing. Right? Probably nothing. Maybe a little bit. But instead, you plug it into my MCP. So when it's orchestrated, hey, what's going on with the lighting plan? It's going to ping your agent and say, hey, Nick's agent, what the hell's going on with the lighting plan? You're like, here's what it is, right? So that's how you have to start thinking about this. So just like we think about orchestration, these MCP servers are really fascinating. I think I'm going to be launching kind of an open source one in the next 30 days, where people can just build.
Breaking news. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you learn something new every week.
For AC in particular?
Yeah, for AC in particular.
Sweet. Love it.
That's why I'm getting everybody vibe coding, man.
Gotcha. Always
Vibe
a grand strategy behind every
Yeah.
small tactical thing you do.
Vibe code your stuff, plug in and strap in. That's the game.
Sweet.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's got to get Barry showing up to build all this stuff. Right? But so I think that and what I love is the argument about these ideas. I tell people, like, you can't argue with me about if. You can argue when, but you can't argue if. I mean, look at like Ahmed at Lumina, right? Look at where he's at now, where he's come from. His development and innovation cycles just could be faster and faster, right? Because a lot of what people forget, like AI, you're going to write a lot more code. I was talking to a guy that's building a humanoid robotics company solo out of his 650 square foot New York apartment. And he's basically 3D printing things at scale and buying like little actuators and all at scale and building mini humanoids.
Insane.
And it's part-time. That's insane. Right? I was just like, dude, like, quit your job. We'll give you some money. Go do something, right? It's like, because those are the type of guys you want to back. A guy that's like side hustling, building humanoid robots out of his 650 square foot apartment. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. 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 It's like the great, there's a term in AI research called unhobbling. Like it's like, different milestones that you become unhobbled, that you unlock over time as a user. And so when you think about the physical world, like humanoids have been largely hobbled because of, many reasons, but one is like just pure expertise and time, and like, that you would have to devote to learn how to build, how to code a humanoid robot. But this guy's able to do it in his free time in his New York apartment because of the knowledge that he's able to find, leveraging the LLMs today. It's insane. I mean, yeah, it's insane.
It's insane, right? And so, and I think we've seen it like on the venture side. I probably have 25 meetings a week with founders, right? High velocity stuff I do. It used to be like, hey, Fiverr interesting.
Yeah.
How much deal flow are you seeing from me these days? It's not because I'm not meeting with people. It's just like not that interesting, right? It's like, hey, like, oh, that's a cool niche product. You have a Revit plugin that does lighting design for hospitals. Somebody can build that. They can build that themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need to go buy niche software or like a feature software. You just build the feature yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think, for those that are startups that are listening in, If your product feels like a feature and you think you're going to grow into a product, you better either do it quick or just be done, open source your product. Maybe just open source your product.
Yeah, the traditional VC advice, if you go to, a lot of the accelerators, the YCs of the world, is like build a simple MVP, right?
Yep.
Leanest product you can possibly build for as cheaply as possible. It doesn't need to have perfect design, doesn't need to be comprehensive in any nature, but you iterate with the MVP over time, and gets you wins you a first market, and gets you a certain amount of customers that get you to the next phase. I think that strategy today is really hard to pull off. Like starting with that first market and iterating and iterating and iterating, because the competition at that phase now, the amount of people that are building really tiny point niche solutions in a really minimal amount of time is like, I mean, we're just that's the the deal flow question. Like we see a lot of small niche products that are actually solving a real problem are interesting,
Right.
but man, like so saturated, and the ability to build it is like you don't need really you don't need like a background in computer science. Like you can learn how to code a lot faster. Like you do need to code, but you don't have to have this like extreme background and knowledge on how to build really complex software.
Yeah. No, I talked to a group today that I said, I was like, look, do you think you're venture fundable? Let's be honest with ourselves. Should I invest in you or in Lovable? Right? Like you tell me if you're venture fundable, and people are like, well, the bar keeps changing. The goalposts keep moving. I'm like, yes, 100%. I was like, and I love using this example that I charged, Blue Nile like $5 million, some insane amount of money to build their first e-commerce site in like 1997. A $99 a month Shopify account has more functionality. And they were venture funded to sell jewelry on the internet. Would you ever venture fund a company today to sell jewelry over the internet? And it's like, no. Like that at that moment in time, sure. Today, absolutely not. So I think the same thing is true with
What why? Because Shopify exists.
right. Because
So
Shopify
I mean,
exists.
they commoditize the ability to go build that infrastructure to sell goods over the internet for any individual.
Right. So why am I gonna invest in your software that someone can code and replit pretty quickly? And I think, look, all this like vibe coding and no code and all that, I think in our industry is just more and more applicable because people buy software that they're using 10% of. They're using 3 of the menus on there, but they were sold a bill of goods. You can do all these things. They're using 30% of it. Once they realize that, like, I can just build my own stuff that actually serves 100% of what I need. Or they're using nothing. Oh, we're using a bunch of spreadsheets. Great. I can vibe code something, get it up to speed, and I can have my own software, right? I don't have to do a spreadsheet anymore. So I think it's a very rare situation where companies in our industry are using 100% of the software they purchase.
Yeah. Second topic, you ready?
Yep.
The VC thesis life cycle is experimentation, pattern recognition, institutionalization of the pattern by others, then failure. If you don't experiment and identify the pattern yourself, then you are at a huge disadvantage. Borrowing other people's VC thesis is not the way. I actually really like this one. I think there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, unpack it a bit. What are you meaning by that?
I think, once again, much like the previous topic, venture capital has been kind of institutionalized. So people say, oh, it worked for YC. Let's build a similar YC model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 1,000 clones out there. And so whatever that pattern was, the early, I haven't dug into the early days of YC, but they clearly saw some pattern through some level of experimentation and said, hey, this works. What we're doing works. But then once everybody knows that it works, they go off and build it. And so once everybody has it, it no longer matters anymore. You have to move on to the next thing. So the YC model is not going to work forever. That's just not how life works, right? So I think it's really tough, especially for us being kind of smaller allocators, to kind of, oh, actually, I don't know. Maybe as smaller allocators, it's easier for us to be creative. And maybe it's easy for, General Catalyst and Andreessen and Thrive to be creative because they're very large allocators. Maybe it's like most markets, the monkey in the middle is the one that struggles, right? Because we can be nimble. We can just, we were talking about something this morning, like, hey, let's just go do that. We can just do that, right? We have an investment committee right here on this call. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for us, for the reason that we maybe don't have the luxury of waiting, is that for us, creativity is survival.
Right.
Like we have to be super scrappy and hustle to find a niche, to find founders before other large firms, recruit them and chat with them. And we have to show, we have to compete with everyone else, right? So like the big firms, even, the types of firms that have the luxury of a really large AUM and balance sheet, like in the right deal, we're still competing with them. So like, how in the world are we, competing with the Founders Fund or a General Catalyst in a deal? And the only way we do that is, one, reach them earlier, or two, add value in a unique way that others cannot. Right. Maybe a third that I would say from personal experience recently is show like really unique conviction that, the large firms, like they're in all the hot deals. Like if we're really convicted in a deal and we really, really believe in it and we show up every day and that comes through in the conversation we're having with the founder, I think there's we've seen, like we get, we'll get carved out and we'll get a spot on the cap table purely by showing that conviction. It's not something you can fake. So like for what it's worth, there's been deals where we haven't been, have had room carved out for us because maybe that conviction didn't come through. So yeah, I think we're actually in a spot where like we have to do what your LinkedIn post says. Like we have to, adapt the thesis constantly in order to, one, figure out where we can actually make money and generate returns while still competing with the best firms in the world. And then two, get in, even if we have access and we see the deals that we want to invest in, like how the hell are we actually going to get on the cap table?
So think about this, Nick, your first curveball question, right? Who is our customer? Who should we be listening to?
It's the founder.
Right. And I would say more and more, I'm realizing like founders that I can kind of intellectually spar with and have good answers. They have good answers and have conviction around their good answers. They're also quick to say, no, I don't know, man. Like they're also good at, I don't know. But when they have the answer, they have a lot of conviction. That's what, in other words, that shapes our thesis. Right. That it's that experimentation. It's the sparring with founders to understand what, but think about it a lot of times, which, we get to evolve our thinking. That's the other benefit of being boutique, right? We get to evolve our thinking quickly and we don't have to ask permission. Is as we evolve our thinking, think about like you go pitch a startup, a VC, and they say, hey, we're a pass because it doesn't fit our thesis. Right. Where does your thesis come from? It came from the hypothesis you had 3 years ago when you raised your fund.
That's right.
Right? Because at the end of the day, what do our, I don't think any of our LPs are going to say, hey, I'm really mad. You guys invested in something that didn't meet your hypothesis. I think they're more interested in us just making just lots of fucking money. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's what they care about. So I think, just like that. I mean, we've talked about some of our portfolio companies that today we wouldn't invest in. Right? At that time, it made a lot of sense. Today, if they walked in the front door, but I think this idea, I mean, I have found myself I've started catching myself when I tell people hey, this isn't a good fit. I used to say it doesn't fit our thesis. I stopped saying
Mhm.
that. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't like. I'm like, I don't like it. I don't see where it's
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, it's
Like,
a cop out answer.
right. I'm like, I don't think you're the right guy. Like, I actually I like the idea, but you're not the right founder. You're not a good founder fit for me.
Yeah.
Right? You're not a good founder fit for me. I don't think I'm a good fit to you. You'll probably be successful, but probably with someone else's money, not mine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
There's
I think that.
there's a there's a firm called Abstract, a VC, and I recently actually don't know much about them, which was it was interesting to get. I listened to it like a deep dive podcast, Invest Like the Best with the
Mhm,
founder last week, and it's a really interesting. His thesis, I think, like jives really well with your LinkedIn post, which was like so his story is fascinating. He was basically broke, bankrupt, failed as a founder, and started Abstract with nothing. And so you think about like how how do you break into Silicon Valley
mhm,
if you're bankrupt and have nothing, you have no money. Um, and it was through his thesis. His thesis was, I've noticed a pattern where if you come from a breakout startup winner,
mhm,
the label would be a unicorn,
mhm,
and your shares vest for whatever reason. You leave the company, maybe post IPO, post acquisition, or even just a bit early, and
mhm,
you come from the pedigree of one of those companies, and you leave. That is the best predictor of outlier success in venture because you've seen what it looks like to build an outlier outcome. You've been a part of the team. You did it actually,
mhm,
and those so the uniqueness of that background, I think, coupled with there was like maybe there was an educational background, like
mhm,
I can't recall it exactly, but maybe like they had an Ivy League background, and then they did that. But he
mhm,
formed this really specific thesis like that, and um, basically created a way, like think of an algorithm to get
mhm,
alerted and notified when someone would leave one of these big firms, and they were in stealth. It was
mhm.
clear they were starting a company. He would
Yeah.
get pinged. He would reach out, would cold email them, cold call them, and he'd get meetings because like founders at that level, they need to raise money. They're not actively
Mhm,
trying to do it. They're in stealth. So he would meet them before everyone else, and then he would also at the same time he was networking in the back end with other VCs, sharing this thesis
mhm.
and showing them really high quality deals because his thesis turned out to be right.
Yep.
That is maybe one of the best predictors of success. If you've seen a unicorn and you've been a part of the team, like you can then go out and do it yourself. And so the quality of deals that he was giving really well-known GPs in Silicon
Mhm.
Valley was somewhat unmatched, and they recognized that early, right? And they
Yeah.
backed him. He had like Mark Andreessen and a lot of other really well-known GPs in his first fund, which
Mhm.
from experience I know that's like extremely impressive.
Insane. Yeah.
But the thesis was like pattern recognition, that
Mhm,
that trend and that pattern was happening,
mhm.
and he institutionalized it, and now he has like one of the bigger seed funds in the U.S.
Mhm. But do you think if he does his next fund, he's gonna follow that same pattern?
I think there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of iterations on it now.
Right.
One of the iterations that he brought up that he did not do at the outset was brand building. He
Yeah.
says, VC today is like you can lose a lot of deals if you're up against highly credible firms with very great brand equity and pedigree, the
Mhm.
Sequoias of the world, right?
Yeah.
Very tough to compete with, even if you have even if you have an N, and they've moved into the spot where they're leading a lot of deals, and so
Mhm,
that lead position is hyper competitive in the best deals. And if you don't
mhm,
have that brand, like he has to meet the founder so early and establish so much trust and rapport in a really
mhm.
short window of time that he's recognized that not having a brand is actually hurting him in that time
Yeah.
window that he has to build trust. So that's one iteration, was like, I need to do this now, and I need to
Mhm.
actually invest in this.
Yeah. No, I mean, look at, like, was it 20 VC? I mean, started off as a podcast, built a ton of brand, right? built a ton of brand interviewing a bunch of VCs. But I would say what he really did is like if you're doing a podcast, if you're doing an episode every day and interviewing a VC or a founder or whatever, and if you're paying attention, you start to see something. You start to see, okay, this is what is working now, and this is the type of
Yeah.
people that are making it work.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna invest in those folks.
Yeah. One
So
tiny iteration he made on the way too was he recognized because of the GPs that were in his fund,
Mhm.
he had unique access to fundraising feedback from some of the best investors in the world. So he would be like the interface between the founder and their fundraising process, and basically, solicit feedback from the best in the world, give it to them in a platter,
Mhm.
and then adjust accordingly. And like no one else was able to do that because they didn't have the access he did.
Yep. No, I mean 100%. But I think that's the point, right? You can't. There is no formula. I mean, I even like shy when founders ask you, "Hey, what stage do you invest in?" I'm like, "What is seed? What is pre-seed? What is?" I mean, we've tried so hard to like once again institutionalize. This is what seed is. This is what pre-seed is. And I just kind of say like, well, we tend to look at stuff that's pre-revenue or unscaled revenue. Try not to like put a label on it, like because I
Has
don't
that
look at it.
has your definition of pre-seed and seed changed over time?
I just stopped caring about it. Like, I think the way I look at it is where in the development of the business do we think that we can understand it the best, right? And that we can be a difference maker to that founder, right? Not just through capital. And so I kind of look at it and say, like, pre-revenue, sometimes formation. I mean, we've invested in companies where people quit their job and we invested. And then I would say, the question is like once people start getting into scaled revenue and they become very metric driven and it's kind of running, I don't know how much value we add there. I really don't. Right. Like I think, hey, we're trying to get from 15 million in recurring to 100 million in recurring. Sure, we could add some value, but I don't think it's as much value as we add like pre 10 million in revenue.
Agreed.
So, I don't know. I've just, but we've built all this vocabulary in venture that I think even the founders are looking for some level of institutionalization. I was actually like playing around with my LinkedIn profile the other day. I almost like deleted venture capitalist and just replaced it with investor because it was just like, I don't know. It just felt like, okay, that's like a bucket. It's like a
You're tired of
bucket.
all the VC ridicule.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, because I don't have a vest. So we don't have Shadow Ventures vest. So it's the other VCs that ridicule me. How
Yeah.
can you even call yourself a VC? You don't have a vest.
Yeah. I
No, but
expect to run into you at a coffee shop in San Francisco one day, and you're going to be like Patagonia'd out. You're
yeah,
gonna be the prototypical VC.
yeah.
One day I'm gonna catch you.
Yeah. It was kind of funny the other day. Someone said something like, "You're the only VC I know that wears earrings," and I was like, "Okay."
I could probably validate that. I don't think I've
I've been like,
ever seen anyone else wear earrings.
yeah, I've seen some VCs with some ink. You got some ink, but piercings not so much. Not a lot
Yeah.
of
No
piercings
one's
out
ever
there.
asked me what it's like to fundraise with someone who wears earrings to the fundraising meetings.
Yeah, and who also like um, struggles to keep his beard in trim.
Yep. Yep.
But no, look. I think that's a lot of what I think. The way that's why I'm kind of excited about like all this AI and robotics stuff because I don't think there's one way to build stuff. I don't think there's one way to execute on this stuff, and I just don't want to. I like that because then it's not like trying to create patterns and sell LPs on some pattern and then exclude founders because they don't fit the pattern. Um, so the reason I was thinking about changing on LinkedIn is like I think there's some deals out there that someone might think like, "Hey, we're not venture fundable. I'm not going to reach out to KP," but maybe they are, right? Maybe they are. Maybe they are venture fundable, but they've talked to 10 other VCs They told them, like, "Here's what you need to look like." And,
Mm.
they've told them no based on that pattern. So I was wondering if I changed it from VC to just investor, do I attract actually outlier founders that maybe have been told no a lot because they don't fit the pattern of seed stage investment,
Mhm.
and then maybe that actually attracts a different type of founder?
Yeah. I still think that I think there's a way to communicate, and I think you do this in your LinkedIn posts and your content. There's a way to communicate that you think differently.
Mhm,
But I think that the average founder is still, they're still searching mostly for venture capitalists, even if they're getting no's.
mhm,
So like as someone who's incentivized to make sure the right founders find you, I think the label of venture capitalist still applies. But I think like how you communicate your philosophy and how and what you're excited about investing in has to come through everything else. I think the label still is okay, but that's at least how I'd interpret it.
yeah, I mean, I didn't change it, so I didn't
Good.
change.
Yeah.
I left it alone.
Good.
I left it alone.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun, Nick. We should do it again sometime.
Episode 1 in the books.
So 1 in the books.
See if I get. We'll see if I get brought back for a second season.
Although
Second
I'm
pilot
the one
season.
I'm the one pushing all the buttons on the recording, so we might have to do this all over again.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah, it was super
All
fun.
right, man.
Thanks for having me.